Hello there. Hi Reader Pops. Welcome to the ultimate book video of the entire year where I review every single book that I read this year. And this is my first full year of being obsessed with reading as an adult. I started last June and I read 69 books that year, but that was only half the year. And then this year I read 110 books, I believe. So I have ordered them all behind me by months and then stacked them, and some of them are not even here. So I'm going to go through these as fast as humanly possible. These videos tend to be a bit harsher on the books because I simply don't have time for nuance when I'm reviewing them all. So I'm gonna tell you the genre and you're gonna be able to tell if I like them or if I didn't and if you should read them. So let's get started with January, shall we? I started off the year out of my comfort zone with some young adult fantasy, which is funny because at the time it was out of my comfort zone. It very much became, it's starting to become a comfort zone. The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. It's got humans and fairies, fairy tale worlds colliding with normal person. It's got politics and it's got a subplot of romance, and this first book I gave 3 stars and I was so disappointed. I was like, why does anyone talk about this series? You guys know how the story goes, right? And then I read the second one, The Wicked King by Holly Black, and this was probably one of my favorite books of the year. Purely because of the subplot of romance. It is enemies to lovers, but they stay enemies. It's just the most unique subplot of romance I've ever read in my entire life. I'm gonna have to reread this series at some point in my life. And then I read the last one, The Queen of Nothing, and this one had me sobbing at the end, and this was also 5 stars. And then I read a random little mystery called The Last Thing He Told Me by Laura Dave. I read this in one go because I had to know what happens. I would recommend this if you're gonna go onto a plane, perhaps, and you wanna read a book that you are not gonna wanna put down. Although, after reading it, I never thought about it again. So you do what you will with that information. And then I read Throne of Glass by Sarah J Maas, which is, it's young adult fantasy, I believe, and she started writing the series when she was 16. So I remember first trying to read this and the amount of exclamation marks she was using, I was a bit icked out by. I did not like it, but then you can definitely tell that her writing improves. So this was kind of fun. It was kind of Hunger Games-y in a way. It's very hard to explain. Second one, Crown of Midnight, and I definitely remember giving this one 5 stars. This is when I was like, okay, I really like this series. I'll continue it. But what I should have done is read the prologue book called Assassin's Blade, but I didn't do that. I ended up reading the third one, which is Heir of Fire. This is where it starts to get chunky, and I didn't like this one, and I don't know if it's because I didn't read the prologue first. There were some new characters added, and I didn't like that POV at all, but I do want to finish this series in 2023, so dipped my toe into the huge fandom that is this book, and I do understand it because of the first 2 books so far. That was my January. So now in February, February was one of the best reading months I had all year. I read Today, Tonight, Tomorrow by Rachel Lynn Solomon. This is a young adult academic rivals to lovers romance book, and it's so cute. It's set on the last day of high school. I actually forget to talk about this book sometimes because I actually did really like it, and I gave it 3.5 stars. There's just this one scene at the end that kind of icked me out and ruined a lot of it for me, but up until that point it was so fun. And then I read Alex Approximately by Jen Bennett. This is another YA romance, very summery, and apparently I gave this one 4 stars. I liked the reveal at the end because they chat online and then they're meeting in person, but they don't know that it's them, and then it's cute. It's like You've Got Mail, the movie, kind of. And then I read The Selection by Kira Cass. I actually read this in middle school. It's a YA dystopian, and I loved it in middle school, so rereading it as an adult was amazing, and I still liked it just as much. I think I gave it 5 stars just based off the vibes and the nostalgia of it all. Then I started the Shatter Me series by Tahara Mafi. This one is also YA dystopian, and when I first read the first few chapters, she's locked in this cell and she's going crazy, and I thought that there were pen marks in the book, like that someone went to the store and did that, but that's actually how it's supposed to be printed out and everything. This first book is just kind of sad because of the world that they live in, and I didn't like this one that much, but then I continued the series. Don't worry, you'll see. I also started the Red Queen series by Victoria Aveyard because this is a YA fantasy that went viral on Book Talk, and I ended up not really liking this book. I gave this one 3 stars. So then I continued the Selection series and I read The Elite, and honestly, it's a trilogy, and in my mind, they're all one book, although this one had my jaw dropping. If you guys know what happens at the end, it takes quite a turn of events. I honestly liked all those books. I don't care that some people hate them. I think you just gotta vibe out and like ignore the stupid parts about the book. That's my opinion about it. 5-star series in my brain. And then I continued the Shatter Me series and I read Unravel Me, and this is when I was like, okay, I like this series. There's a big subplot of romance in this book, and it's very action-packed, and I love the characters. So I gave Unravel Me 4 stars, and then I started The Summer I Turned Pretty series by Jenny Han. If you guys don't know about this cute little summer romance series, young adult, it got turned into a show that went pretty viral. I'm sure you've all seen it, and I loved the summer vibes of this book. Did I give it 5 stars? Yeah. I gave it 5 stars. And then I read the 3rd book in the Shatter Me series, Ignite Me, and this is when I was like, okay, now this is a series. I gave this one 5 stars and I read it in one sitting and I absolutely loved it. It was so action-packed. I mean, it is definitely action-packed in like a middle school dystopian way, but did I have fun and feel entertained and time flew by? Yes, so I loved it. And then I read Dial A for Aunties by Jessie Q. Sutanto, which is I always say that and then cringe a little bit after, but I'm also not gonna try to do it with an accent, you know, so it's just one of those things. This is a cozy mystery because it's like an accidental murder, but it's also a comedy. There's also some romance in it, and it was really funny and just really a perfect blend of everything, and I gave it 5 stars. This summer I turned pretty serious. This middle book is so sad. Honestly, look up the trigger warnings because I kind of was unprepared for what happened, and I was so sad while reading these books. And then this one is fun. The characters kind of act differently, and I don't know, the series didn't end perfectly, but I really loved it as a series, and I highly recommend it for just some fun, easy, light. Okay, this one's not light, but some reading at the beach. And that was my February, so on to March. Oh my, I started March with Better Than the Movies by Lynn Painter, young adult romance, favorite book of the year. We don't need to say anything else. And then I read Legend by Marie Lu, which is a young adult dystopian novel. And I did have fun while reading this. Some of the text in here is gold, so that's pretty cool. But I had no interest afterwards in completing the series, but I did give it 4 stars. And if some random guy were to ask me for a fiction book recommendation, I could possibly say this book, you know what I mean? The Summer of Broken Rules by K.L. Walther, young adult romance. Perfect summer vibes. 5 stars, one of my faves. I read the To All the Boys I've Loved Before series by Jenny Han, and I'd actually watched the movies before reading the books, but the books were so fun. I mean, it was just, I felt like such a little teenage girl while reading these. I really base my book recommendations off vibe, if you can't tell. Love and Gelato by Jenna Evans Welch. This one I thought was for 12-year-olds. It is young adult romance, and it's set in Italy, but there's actually mystery in it as well, and it's not for 12-year-olds. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I gave this 4 stars, but it's so cute. I actually highly recommend this book. Not the movie though, that they made. And then I read Anna and the French Kiss by Stephanie Perkins, which is set in Paris, and it was so good up until the end. And there's a trope in here that it made me so angry. I was like, what is that? Now I hate the entire romance. So 3 stars. And then for a video where I read like Robert Pattinson, weirdly enough, I read The Ballad of the Sad Cafe by Carson McCullers. I listened to it on audiobook, and you can watch that video if you want my in-depth thoughts about these books because it was definitely an interesting experience. And then I read Selected Stories by E.M. Forster, which made me feel smart. And I read some poems by Baudelaire, which were very dark. That was an interesting video experience. On to April. I read The Romantics by Leah Conan, which is a book about love told from love's perspective. And that part was funny. Love being the narrator was interesting and cool, but the rest of the book kind of fell flat for me. I don't know. It does hold a little bit of like a space in my brain and heart because I've never heard anyone talk about it. And there are still some scenes that I remember. And when that happens, I feel like it's for a reason, but I never really recommend this book, and it was just kind of a 3 stars. But if it sounds interesting to you that it's from love's perspective, I think you might like it because it did make me giggle a little bit, you know? And then I read Caraval by Stephanie Garber. You guys are gonna hear me talk about this author for one of my favorite books that I read in December, but this one was the start of the Caraval trilogy, and I gave it 3 stars. It's a YA fantasy, and it's got a very magical circus setting to it, but something about it fell flat for me, and I'm not really sure why, especially considering the reviews you're gonna hear from me coming up. And then I tried to read Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. This is more of a literary fiction, or no, not literary fiction, historical fiction, and I rated this 2 stars. It was so slow for me. And then also looking up the plot of the book and the author's real life. Very interesting if you want to go down that rabbit hole. 99 Days by Katie Cotugno. This is a young adult romance, and it's very summery, and I loved it a lot. I always say it's 4 stars, but it's gotta be 4.5. It's gotta be really up there because I really recommend this book. And then I read It Only Happens in the Movies by Holly Bourne. This is also a young adult romance, and I just walked into the bookstore, loved the cover, and bought it, and I did not like this book very much. I mean, it was 3 stars. It wasn't horrible. That was my April. And then in May, okay, I don't have a lot of May's books with me. I started the month off with Reminders of Him by Colleen Hoover. And at the time, I rated the book 5 stars. I don't like a lot of her books, but that one I liked. And then I read One of Us is Lying by Karen M. McManus, which is a young adult mystery thriller of sorts. And I gave this 4 stars. There's a show of it on not Netflix, on Peacock. Of course. It was fun because there's just so many like gossipy secrets that keep getting revealed. So that was a pretty fun read. And then I read Book Lovers by Emily Henry. Every year that we get a new Emily Henry book is just gonna be one of the highlights of the year. I will say I was disappointed that this book is not about 2 people who are in love with reading necessarily. They do work in the book industry, but I don't know. I was kind of picturing Love and Other Word vibes where they read together and it's super cute. I still really liked the book, but I don't know. It's definitely my least favorite Emily Henry book that I've read so far, but I still gave it a 4.5 stars. One True Loves by Taylor Jenkins read. Crazy plot, gave it 5 stars. The Roughest Draft by Emily Wibberley and Austin Sigmund Broca. This is an adult romance, but more literary fiction style. They're both authors. 5 stars, one of my favorites. And then I read Every Summer After by Carly Fortune. I gave that one 3 stars because it kind of felt exactly like the book Love in Other Words, which I already love so much. So yeah, I didn't love the reveal at the end of that book. And then I read Funny You Should Ask, which I actually liked that one a decent amount. I gave that one 4 stars. And then I read The Cheat Sheet by Sarah Adams, which is an adult romance, but it has no spice. And this book is like eating a cupcake, is what I always say. So 5 stars. Although maybe I should say Brownie Sundae, because I wouldn't rate a cupcake 5 stars, but I would definitely rate a Brownie Sundae 5 stars. And then I read Something Wilder by Christina Lauren. This was such an out-of-pocket book for Christina Lauren to publish. It was very different for them, which they were probably just bored and wanted to try writing something new. So I applaud them for that. At the time I gave it 4 stars, although looking back, I think I would have realistically given it a 3 stars. And then I read this little novella called Under One Roof by Allie Hazelwood because I love her writing, but I gave that one 2 stars. And then I read Conversations with Friends by Sally Rooney, which is a literary fiction, and I gave this 4.5 stars. One of the most interesting books I've read this year. And then in June, oh my gosh, June was another amazing reading month. I started it with Winter in Paradise by Elin Hilderbrand because she writes some great summery beach books, but I only gave this one 3 stars. And then I read The Rest of the Story by Sarah Dessen because this is a very beloved young adult author, but I also only gave this one 3 stars. And then stepping out of my comfort zone, I read a memoir, I guess this is, Everything I Know About Love by Dolly Alderton. This was very entertaining because she just is very open about all of the crazy nights out that she's had. So that was fascinating to read. It felt like a girl came over to my house and was gossiping with me about all of her crazy adventures. And for that, I think I gave it 3.5. That's more accurate. I gave it 3.5 stars. The Do-Over by Lynn Painter. This is the one where my name and y'all's name is in the acknowledgements. And y'all know, I love Lynn Painter. Young adult romance, 5 stars. One of my faves. Mary Jane by Jessica Anya Blau. Literary fiction coming of age story. Very summery, beachy, best cover ever, and I gave it 5 stars. One of my favorites. Nora Goes Off Script by Annabelle Monaghan. I hope that more people read this book. I think it's so cute. It's an adult romance and I just loved it. I love the setting of it as well. It really, I have a picture of it in my brain. And then I read Float by Kate Merchant. I love the cover of this. It's a young adult romance and it's really interesting because this book actually started on Wattpad and the author was like 16 years old or something when she started writing this, and then she finished it after going to school for writing in college. And it was really interesting because you could definitely see the writing start off so young and then improve throughout the book. So this book I feel like was more so an inspiration to me as someone who wants to become an author, and watching how her writing improved in one book. If I were her, I would think this is so cool that it like encapsulated that experience. But overall the book was like a 3 stars, but it was fun, it was cute. And then I read The Guest List by Lucy Foley, which is a thriller book, and it was very fun. At the time I had not really read any thrillers, and I gave this 4.5 stars, which you'll see in another month when I just went insane and only read thrillers. That was probably the catalyst for that. And then I read These Hollow Vows by Lexi Ryan, which is a young adult romance, and I really liked this one a lot. This has fae in it, which I think means fairies and humans, and I gave it 4 stars. I think I already said that. And moving on to July, this is the month that I only read thrillers. It was insane. This is one of the funniest months to me. I can't believe I did this. Starting off with The Hunting Wives by May Cobb. This is what started the addiction, okay? I don't know how to describe this book. This lady gets caught up with a bunch of moms who do some very strange things together. And there's this one lady who's kind of the ringleader. Oh my gosh, reading this book just felt truly a unique experience. 5 stars. But I never talk about it as one of my favorites. 4.5 stars. Every Last Secret by A. Artur. Very similar vibes to this. The morals don't exist in thriller books, and that's kind of why they are thrilling. At the time I rated this 5 stars. I think now looking back, I would give it like a 3.5. And then I read My Summer Darlings by May Cobb, the same author as The Hunting Wives, and this one was a 2 star. I do not recommend that anyone reads this book. I did not like it very much. Randomly, I read a YA contemporary fiction, so I read The Start of Me and You by Emery Lord. Love the cover. This was honestly fun to read, but it was a little bit flat for me, so I gave it a 3.5, but it's cute. The Lifeguards by Amanda Eyre Ward. This was very slow for me and I wanted to DNF it, and then I ended up kind of liking it, and I gave it 4 stars, but I think realistically it's a 3.5. And then I read One of Us is Dead by Geneva Rose. This book is randomly so heavy. Same vibes of like rich moms who gossip type of thing, and I gave this one a 3.5. And then I read The House Across the Lake by Riley Sager, and I gave that one 6 stars. Okay, it's a 5, but it's one of my favorite books ever. I highly recommend that you read that one. And then you're gonna see that my Riley Sager obsession began. The House Across the Lake by Ashley Winstead. This is in the dark academia category. There's a murder mystery and there's a group of friends, and I really liked it. I think I gave it 4.5 stars. Oh, I gave it 5, but I would give it 4.5 stars. See, the end of the year is kind of when I revise things, which I don't know if, I think it is fair to do that because you kind of get a clearer picture of your thoughts the more distance you have from a book, but also your reading taste changes a lot. The Paris Apartment by Lucy Foley. There were some aspects of the book that I really liked and some that I really didn't, so it's very hard for me to rate. I think at the time I gave it 4 stars, and the ending was just so shocking. It was such a great moment of surprise that I kind of have to keep it 4 stars. Lock Every Door by Riley Sager. This one is definitely 5 stars. If you want to read a fun thriller, read this one. Survive the Night by Riley Sager. This one's more of a 3 star, but the setting was cool, and if you really like movie references, pretty cool. 90s era. And then I read 4 Aunties and a Wedding by Jesse Q. Sutanto, which is the sequel to Dial A for Aunties, which if you remember, I gave that one 5 stars, and then I gave this one 2 stars, and it ruined everything I loved about that first book, and that makes me very sad. But I still recommend the first book. And then I read Final Girls by Riley Sager, which I did give 5 stars, but it's more of like a slasher book, and it's probably one of the scariest ones that I read this year, and I don't really end up recommending it because it was so scary. It matches my shirt. And then in August, oh my gosh, August, I do not know what happened. I read 21 books, but I say 20 because one of them was like at midnight. These Twisted Bonds by Lexi Ryan, which was the sequel to These Hollow Vows, and I did not like the sequel very much. I need to admit things to myself more because at the time I gave it 4 stars, but realistically it's like a 3.5. The Bodyguard by Catherine Center. I love this book. It's 5 stars. It's a adult romance with no spice. It's so cute. It's fake dating, and I'm gonna read every book that she comes out with, and I want to read some of her backlog as well. I continued the Shatter Me series in this month, so I went to the 4th book, Restore Me, and I gave this 5 stars. I read Mr. Wrong Number by Lynn Painter, which is her adult romance book. I love her as an author so much, but her adult romance was not for me, so I gave this a 3.5 star. There are novellas in the Shatter Me series, which are just like small, tiny little books, so this one includes 2 novellas in it. So I read the first one in here, which was called Shadow Me, and I gave it 4 stars. I also did a 24-hour readathon in this month, so it kind of makes sense. The No Show by Beth O'Leary, which is a more so literary fiction romance book with a crazy plot twist at the end. It was so sad at the end. Ugh. It was so sad. Very cool reveal though, because you don't understand what's happening. Okay, I'm gonna stop talking. I'm gonna end up revealing something. Literary fiction's a bit slow for me. This is a really cool book. It's very unique. And then I read Defy Me by Tahari Mafi, and I gave it 5 stars. Reveal Me, the second novella in here, gave that 4 stars. And then I read Dance of Thieves by Mary E. Pearson, which is a young adult fantasy romance series, and I gave it 5 stars. One of my favorites. Vow of Thieves, 5 stars. You guys should read these. So good. Imagine Me, which is the 6th book in the series. What did I give this? 4 stars. Oh, something went wrong here, hey? Nothing went wrong, it just wasn't 5 stars. The Layover by Lacey Walden, which is a cute little summery romance book, 3 stars. Sorcery of Thorns by Margaret Rogerson, a YA fantasy book. It held so much promise at the beginning. It was giving favorite book vibes, and then it got completely ruined at the end. I didn't understand what was happening. 3.5 stars. I have a whole video on this book, okay? Magnolia Parks by Jessa Hastings. I've never had a more visceral reaction to a book. I recommend watching the entire vlog to see what I'm talking about. 2 stars. And then I read Believe Me, which is the last novella in the Shatter Me series, and this book was so good. I gave it 5 stars, and it was actually one of my favorites. It was so random. I was not expecting that. And then I tried to go back to the first novellas in the series, so I read Destroy Me, but I gave it a 3 star, I think. So I kind of stopped with the novellas. And then I read Clockwork Angel by Cassandra Clare, which is the first book in the Infernal Devices series, and I'm trying to get into Cassandra Clare books, and I gave this one 4 stars. I can definitely see the potential, and I want to continue, but it's a little bit confusing because there's also a series called City of Bones, and some people tell me to start with that series. Some people say it doesn't matter. One of those things that just confuses me. So I started with Infernal Devices, and I hope that's okay. And then I continued the Caraval series with the second book, which is Legendary by Stephanie Garber, and I started listening to it on audiobook because the words were so magical and the writing was very lyrical, which I get a bit bored reading, but over audio it was really pretty, and I gave this one 4 stars. So the series started going up from here. I read The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. I'm very proud of myself for reading this, and it was actually hilarious. I think I gave it 5 stars because I feel obligated to, but it was also really enjoyable. It's fantasy, if you're unaware. It's like the fantasy. Don't know if you've ever heard about it, but some people like it. And then I read The Ex-Hex by Erin Sterling because it was October. No, it wasn't actually, it was August. Why did I read this in August? I think it was starting to feel like fall. I gave this 3.5 stars. Okay, and finally, we're going into September. Although the first book in September I technically read in August, but we're just not gonna talk about that. Oh boy, I started the Court of Thorns and Roses series by Sarah J. Maas, which is a very famous fantasy romance series. I gave the first book 4 stars. I have an entire reading vlog of these books if you wanna go watch them. Here's the second book, A Court of Mist and Fury, and I gave this one 5 stars. This is notoriously everyone's favorite of the series, and I definitely could see why. And then I read the third one, which is the thickest. This is actually the longest book I read all year. It was 700 1,500 pages. A Court of Wings and Ruin, and this one was my favorite. These are so pretty. And then there's a little novella called A Court of Frost and Starlight, which I did not like this one very much. I gave it 3 stars. And then I finished the Caraval series with Finale, and I gave this one 5 stars. This is when it started to get good. And then I read Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone by J.K. Rowling. I read this as a kid as well, and I gave it 4 stars. This is when Ryan was choosing my books for me. Percy Jackson and the Olympians, first book in the Lightning Thief series by Rick Riordan. Pretty low-key book, no one's ever really heard of before. I gave it 3 stars. But I have heard that it gets very good, and I believe you. Moving on. I read The Personal Librarian by Marie Benedict and Victoria Christopher Murray. I mostly listened to it on audiobook. This is a historical fiction, and it was very interesting because it's based on a true story. And that story is crazy. So I recommend this one if you like historical fiction. I gave it 3.5 stars. And then I read Ender's Game by Orson Scott Card, possibly the only science fiction I read this year, but I loved it. I think I gave it 5 stars. Yeah, I did do that, didn't I? Might try to get into more sci-fi next year. And I rounded off the month with a nonfiction book, Surprised by Joy by C.S. Lewis. This is kind of a little bit of a memoir, but more so about his particular journey with coming to know Jesus. I'm a huge C.S. Lewis fan, so it was interesting to me, but I would not recommend it to the average Joe who's not a major C.S. Lewis stan, because I feel like he just talked about a bunch of random stuff for like 75% of the book, and then he really goes deep at the end, and it was so cool. But he talks about his school life for so much of it, and it took me months to get through this book, but 5 stars because come on. And then in October, I read The Final Gambit by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. This is the 3rd book in the Inheritance Game series, which is a young adult mystery, subplot of romance type book. It was so fun. I gave the first 2 books 5 stars. And then this one felt like a completely different book. Maybe she should have kept it a duology because I just didn't like this. I wrote down 4 stars though. I think I'm just a little bit biased towards the series because I still recommend it, but realistically it was like a 3.5, I think. Rock, Paper, Scissors by Alice Feeney. I was in a big reading slump at this point, and this is a thriller, and I loved the reveal at the end, and I think I gave this 4.5 stars. A very, very, very fun thriller. Accidentally Amy by Lynn Painter, which is an adult romance. This is something that she was writing over email in a newsletter, and then people wanted her to publish it, and I just thought it'd be like a cute little fall book, but I gave it 2.5 stars. Ooh, Truly Devious by Maureen Johnson. It's a YA dark academia murder mystery, and I really liked this. It's the start of a series, so I'm hopeful that I'm going to like it. I gave it 4.5 stars. Wowee. And then I started Shadow and Bone by Leigh Bardugo. Very famous YA fantasy series, and I gave this one 4 stars. I think I'm also gonna really like this series. And then I read It Starts With Us by Colleen Hoover. Very anticipated read for everybody, and I liked this one. I gave it 3.5 stars. So I didn't like it that much, but I did like it. Oh wow, our last stack here. In November, I read Not a Happy Family by Sherry Lapina. It's a mystery, and I gave it 3 stars. I don't recommend that book. And then There Were None by Agatha Christie. I was reading like Rory Gilmore for a video, and I gave this one 4 stars. The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde, and I gave this one 4 stars as well. Sit, Walk, Stand by Watchman Nee, a nonfiction Christian book. Very short, easy read. I don't really know what to rate it. Maybe 4 stars. I liked it a good bit. Last Time We Met by Emily Houghton. This is a adult British romance, no spice, and I give it 4.5 stars. It's a little bit sad, but not too sad, and I highly recommend it. I really like this book. There's Something About Mary by Cody Hall, a Christmas romance book, 3 stars. And then in December, this is all new stuff because I have not posted a wrap up for this. All I Want for Christmas by Cody Hall, 3 stars. Tweet Cute by Emma Lord. It's a YA romance book, and I really recommend it. I gave it 4 stars. It was very fun. The Atlas Paradox by Olivia Blake. Oh my, this is one of my most anticipated releases of this entire year because The Atlas 6 was one of my favorite books of the year last year, and this sequel felt like I was reading a completely different book. It pains me so much. I gave this book 3 stars, and I just didn't like where she took the storyline at all, but it is a trilogy, I think, and I'm definitely gonna keep reading it. But oh wow, last 2 books that I get to talk about. I feel like I do this every year. I read amazing books at the end of the year, and then I need to remember to talk about them next year. I read Once Upon a Broken Heart and The Ballad of Never After by Stephanie Garber, which is after the Caraval trilogy. We are in that same world, but this is like a different set of characters and a different plot. So you could technically just jump into these books without reading the Caraval trilogy, because as you guys saw, I didn't love the entire Caraval trilogy, but these 2 books right here are so magical, are so fast-paced, a subplot of romance, It's one of my favorites. I loved everything about these books. They are whimsical, they are happy. I love them so much. They're in my top 10 books of all time. And if you don't want to read the entire Caraval trilogy to get to these, please just read these because I love them. These are the special editions, and are they not the coolest, cutest things you've ever seen? Please read these books. I love them. Now that my voice is gone, thank you for watching all my book videos this year. I cannot wait to make more next year, so I hope you guys stay interested in books. Could you do that for me? Could you stay interested in books? Because I want to just keep making book videos. But in the meantime, follow me on Instagram, on TikTok, on my main channel. Subscribe here for more book content. And I'm gonna go drink some water now. Bye, guys.